Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. One of the things I have done over the last 4 years is connect the dots on different amalgamations of musicians and their actions within a period of time in music, when you could find work as a session player, play gigs at strip clubs, and the multitude of venues in every...
Jake, can I interrupt you? I apologize, but I'm having a hard time hearing you.
You're having a really hard time hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just see if it improves, okay?
Okay.
These amalgamations were everywhere, but the cities I have most heavily explored and where these amalgamations seemed to grow off and out of each other were in New York, Chicago, Nashville, Muscle Shoals, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. My guest is a drummer from Southern California whose laid-back style fit perfectly into the white boy blues that washed up in sun-splashed L.A. He could play folk, ballads with David Blue, bluegrass with Sneaky Pete, and blue-eyed soul with Jackson Browne. My guest had a reputation, which is why when Bob Weir came to Los Angeles to find a working rhythm section, he found one with my guest and Rick Carlos and Brent Mydland on the heels of Batdorf and Rodney. This unit sparkled and was a great fit for Bobby as he tried to step out of the shadow of the Grateful Dead, playing a bouncing Poison Ivy that my daughters listened to on the way to school. My guest has seen the industry change. The near impossibility of keeping a unit together is almost unheard of unless you can sell out a 30,000-seat rock palace. The values in music and performance reflect that of our society, one of imbalance. My guest still swings the band, but provides marriage counseling to help offset this imbalance. John Mauceri, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you, Jake. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's nice. It's great to connect with you, man. I'd like you to go back in time, talk about when you first got into the drums, the kind of woodshedding you would do to practice. Like, did you have a setup in your garage? How did you how did you woodshed?
Well, it's sort of an interesting thing. I actually come from a very much a showbiz family. My mother was a professional dancer, and I mean a real dancer, not like a showgirl or something like that, or a stripper.
Right.
She was ballet trained. She worked on Broadway. She was ice skater, too. She was in the Ice Capades. And when she divorced my father, who was a singer, disc jockey, comedian, DJ kind of guy,
yeah,
she ended up in Las Vegas, which was a place where she could work and as a dancer and raise me and my two sisters. So I actually grew up in Las Vegas, and my mother worked at all those hotels back in the late 50s and during the 60s. And so I actually was there for that kind of rat pack experience. We weren't rat packers. We didn't hang out on the strip there and all that, but I did go see a lot of shows backstage. I hung out with Milton Berle and Red Skelton, and we had Jimmy Durante sing a song to us. Like, we had a table right in the front, and he came over and sang with me and my sisters, and the Kingston Trio, and then the rock thing. It wasn't really coming into Vegas at that time, but there was a few things.
So there wasn't really a drum set, right? There was no trap set.
Oh yeah, there was trap set. There was really, really good musicians in Las Vegas in that time. All the great musicians who were in the big bands from the two generations before that, they were all getting old, and like kind of like my mom, they needed a place where they could work, and the best of the best ended up in Las Vegas.
Right.
There were some really good, and my stepfather was not one of those guys because he was too young, but he was a classical percussionist, and he played with the Cleveland Symphony as a young man, and with the West Point Orchestra, because he wasn't a cadet, but he was in the Army, and he got stationed at West Point to be in the band there. He met my mom, and he was a percussionist. He isn't really a drum set drummer, but he had drums all around the house. And when I was around 12 years old, I was playing clarinet, and I got attracted to these drums, and right about the same time the Beatles broke, and I switched over from clarinet to drums.
Oh, that's so classic.
That's what it was.
That's
my
so freaking cool.
Taught me for the first couple of years, and then he transferred me to a guy who was more like a strict drummer. My stepfather was like a vibraphone, timpani, and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, really? The vibes are my favorite instrument by far. I mean, I don't play them, but I feel.
I studied them for about 4 or 5 years, and I had a set and marimba. I even took a xylophone with me on the road. I was working with Jackson Browne and Warren Zevon, and Warren was opening our show as a solo, and then we played a couple songs with him, and I brought along this little tiny marimba, hoping I could play it on this beautiful song he wrote called Carmenita, and I think Carmenita or Carmelita, off his first album. And we never did it, but I carried him around on the road with me for like 6 weeks.
No, I mean it's such a with the advent of the rock palaces and like these huge arenas, like the vibes are like it's just unfortunate because it's such a romantic instrument. Like in a smaller club setting, if it's played well, and you just don't see it anymore. I mean, I don't know.
No, you don't. No, yeah, it is a beautiful.
It's not like Cal Jader. It's not like Jader. Like that stuff is like.
Yeah, Gary Burton I used to listen to a lot, and he was cool. And they used to use him on a lot of the Motown records. That guy, I can't remember his name, the percussionist, but he used to play a lot of vibes.
I've interviewed them all: Bobby Porter Hall, King Harrison. I mean, Crusher. Those guys. Those to me. I love the fact that do you think that it was the Beatles or was it when George Harrison got into all that polyrhythm stuff? Like that is that when you also when he the Ali Akbar Khan, or were you just when you first started hitting the drum set? When was that?
When I first started getting on the drum set?
Yeah, basically
about 14 or 15. My stepfather wouldn't let me have a drum set until I played snare drum, classical snare drum, for a year. So I had to learn all the rudiments and learn how to read. I wasn't a great reader, but I was actually really good with the rudiments. I could cut the other guys in the high school bands. We had these cutting contests as he would get first chair in the percussion, and I could cut them with the rudiments. And then next week they would come back with some really hard reading thing, and they would cut me. So we would battle back and forth. But I started the drum set about 15. My stepdad finally got me on a Ludwig drum set.
This is awesome. This is great. So the first, but did you know when you got on the set? I mean, did you build like a place in your garage somewhere, or how quickly did you link up?
This is kind of funny because this was back, before we had all the electronic stuff we have now. I had my drum set in my bedroom. I put them in the corner of the bedroom, so they were facing out from the corner. I got 2 AM radios, like desktop radios. I put one on each side of the drum set, and I would tune them to the same channel, the same station, which in Las Vegas at that time was a small town. There was only 1 or 2 pop stations. And I would play along with all the songs that came on the radio. I turned the volume up all the way, or at least as loud as I could before it distorted, and then I would play along with the drums. I didn't have headphones,
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
Well, I mean, not. I'm just trying to say where were your folks? Like they didn't care that you were just rocking that?
My stepdad would only let me practice when he was at work. And so he worked nights. Yeah. He worked at the Desert Inn Hotel, so I would do most of my practicing at night. I mean, sometimes I would practice on a practice pad or something like that.
Was he in a jazz group? Was he like in a jazz group?
Was my father? Was I a jazz player?
Stepfather.
My stepfather was, yeah. Well, like I said, he was a classically trained percussionist. So in the hotels, he was in the orchestra, and he played vibes, marimba, congas, timpani. For all the big shows, they had the big production numbers, like Viva
Boy, that is pretty. That's pretty sophisticated.
Like Jerry Lewis and Connie Stevens and the big stars that would come through town. The whole orchestra would. It was the Desert Inn Orchestra.
He was just really adding a lot of colors, right? I mean, he never played a lot. He was never.
Right. It was a color thing. Well, the show would start with the kettle drum roll.
Yeah, right.
The Desert Inn Hotel is proud to present Jerry Lewis, and so he did that. He was a very good musician. He was a good piano player and a really good drummer as well. He was a very talented guy.
Did you get to see Buddy Rich at all?
Buddy Rich, I swear to God, I'm not making this up, lived a block away from me in Las Vegas.
Yeah, no. Everybody lives a block away from Mauceri, man. Everybody.
He lived a block away from his daughter was friends with my sister.
Wow.
And she used to come over to our house and hang out. And I remember Buddy, because they were all a little younger than me, like 2 or 3 years younger than me. So they'd be playing out in the street. It would be getting dark, and Buddy would come out and yell at his daughter, Kathy, get out of the street. You're not supposed to be out here with him. But I used to stand by his wall and listen to him practicing the wall outside of his house.
No way.
Las Vegas.
No
I never had
way,
the desire
man.
to be a Buddy Rich kind of drummer. I was never, back then especially, I was just into rock and roll. I just wanted to rock.
You wanted to
I could care
rock.
less about the jazz thing back then.
You just wanted to rock. I love it. You just wanted it.
I did. I was totally hooked. I didn't tune it to any jazz stations, those radios. I tuned them to the pop rock stations, and I played along with whatever came on the radio. It was before FM,
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. What year was it, actually? Probably like mid-'60s?
That would be, like around, let's see, I was 15, it was 1967. So at least in Las Vegas they didn't have FM yet. They might have been having it in L.A. and other places, but we didn't really have any.
Did you do any, at any point in your career prior to moving, or maybe even during your time in L.A., did you ever do any, organ drum duo bands? I know a lot of cats in Vegas did, these just organ and drums. Again, that's something you don't see anymore.
Yeah.
Did you...
I didn't do, like casual, loungy kind of stuff. I mean, I did do casual, loungy gigs, but they were never just organ drums. But I did work with a guy who was like a Professor Longhair.
Yeah. How did that come about?
I'm not going to be able to remember his name. He was from New Orleans. He was a Tulane University guy, and he was really good. And we had a band playing around Hollywood.
Wow.
It was just me and him, and we'd set the drums up in the drums and the piano. He played one of those Yamaha portable grands that were kind of popular for a while. And we did all this Professor Longhair and this other New Orleans stuff, and he wrote things in that vein. And that was a lot of fun.
Did you feel comfortable?
I've done a lot of trio work with just piano and left-hand bass and guitar, all different kinds like that.
When did you start playing? At what point did you just start playing professionally, or did you go to college at all?
No, I didn't go to college, much to my parents' dismay, especially my stepfather.
It was a different time, man. It was a different time. It was a totally different. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, even
and my stepfather didn't believe in rock and roll. He never thought I would amount to anything. So I started doing gigs within a year of starting to play the drums. I used to play, at the very beginning we'd play like school dances, and then I started working with older guys. I mean, they would lie about my age, and I would play some of the teenage clubs on the Strip in Las Vegas.
Wow.
There was one called the Pussycat where we used to play, and during the summer we would work from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. And then I started playing these in Las Vegas is a 24-hour town. I played after-hours bars that were places where the locals who worked on the Strip and stuff would go after they were done working and drink and hang out and dance. A couple of them were gay bars. And, I was like 15, 16 years old. It was a wild experience. And I would only do it during the summer, I think, and maybe on weekends. And then from that, I started also doing original stuff, and that's where I met Rick Carlos in Las Vegas.
You met Carlos in Vegas.
Yeah.
Talk about that immediately, please.
Yeah, sure, I'd be glad to. And let me know if I'm going on. I get excited reminiscing. So,
dude, come on, man. This is. I mean, this is like. I mean, I don't. There are very few situations where I would go this deep, but this is so where my heart is, man. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate that. Thanks.
It's true, man.
Rick came to town. I was 16. Rick came to town with a band called Terracotta, which was a really good band. And they had, they'd hooked up with this management guy, Michael Schivo, who who was with a local promoter in Vegas, and they used to have a lot of concerts in Vegas back then. And this guy had promised them gigs, so they came down there with this. They were all from the Bay Area, kind of East Bay, Contra Costa County, Walnut Creek, Concord, Pleasant Hill, those little cities over there. And they came to L.A. with this drummer, who was actually a really good drummer. I met him before, David Blanchard. And but David was really young, too. And when he went away, he was gone for a little while, and his mom made him come back. These guys were all older, which is to say they were in their very late teens, early 20s.
Right.
They were legally adults. And they heard me somewhere, or heard about me. I don't remember. It might have been the agent who turned them on to me, because I was working with local bands around Vegas at the time, including some original stuff there. And he put me with this band, and it was a 3-guitar bass and drums band, and they did a lot of things that were, like the Eagles were doing later, like twin harmonies and 3-part twin guitar line harmonies, like the Allman Brothers or the Eagles would do. And 3-part vocal harmonies, and they had a really strong singer and 2 pretty good songwriters for that era and being that young. And so I hooked up with that band and fell in love with the band. And we started doing shows around town. We opened for Jethro Tull, because we had this agent, and we opened for Spirit.
So this agent would drive all the heavy acts that came in there to play with you. They would put them over with you guys.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The agent really was very helpful as a conduit for you to get those guys.
Agent?
The agent, he got those guys to.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He was. He had the juice. He was a legitimate guy, and he was working for this legitimate company. So he got us some pretty good gigs, and then we got a few on our own. We were doing concerts at the university, UNLV out there, and we would do acoustic sets. We could go to the coffee house and do acoustic unplugged stuff. And this was back, in '69.
So it was upright bass.
No, he didn't play upright bass. He played electric bass, but turned down. and I think I played a shaker or a conga or something like that, or bongos. I don't remember. But we could do. It was a really good band, really solid. And then we moved to L.A. The day after I graduated high school. I didn't even go to my graduation ceremony.
Oh my God!
I couldn't care less about that. I was just totally into this band, in love with music and wanting to make music. We moved to L.A., and literally about a month later, we broke up. I actually cried when the band broke up. Real tears. And I had to tuck my tail between my legs and come back to Las Vegas for a while.
Wow. Yeah, but so you got back to Vegas. So wait, correct me if I'm wrong, but Carlos was in Terracotta? He was in that...
Yeah, Carlos was in Terracotta. That's where I met him. And then he went back to the Bay Area. I went back to Vegas, and actually for a while I was really floundering. I mean, it was only 17. My parents had moved out of Vegas. I was homeless for a while. I told you earlier before we started the interview that I reconnected with my biological father. That was when I started doing that. I went up to Seattle, and I lived with him for a while. I bummed around the Bay Area, sleeping on people's couches for a while. I did the same thing in Vegas, and then I had to get in touch with Mark Rodney from Batdorf and Rodney. And Mark Rodney used to live in Las Vegas, too. His dad was, I don't know if you know this.
He was Red Rodney. Yeah, absolutely.
Really
absolutely.
Yeah, Red Rodney. And Red had lived in Vegas, too. He's one of those musicians I talked about earlier who settled in Las Vegas and worked in the bands. And he was phenomenal. I used to hear him play. And Mark had heard Terracotta, and Mark was a Terracotta fan. And when Mark Rodney and John Batdorf had got together and got a deal with Atlantic Records, and they'd done their first album with Ahmet Ertegun. I mean, this is, talk about rock and roll history. Then they'd done it with studio musicians, and they wanted to put a band together to go on the road. And Mark called me, and I called Rick, and that's how that thing started.
So you enjoyed playing with Carlos in that band? I mean, even though you guys both...
Yeah, Rick, Carlos, and I gelled together really well. It was kind of weird because we had a quite different styles and what we liked in music. He was an East Bay funk guy, so to him the music world rose and sank with bands like Tower of Power and Sons of Champlin and stuff like that, which I like too. But he was like totally into it, and I was more into the folk rock. I was into the Doors. I was into the Byrds heavy, and into the whole acoustic music thing.
I really respect it, and I'm going to tell you flat out. I lean, like, in my inclinations. I lean more towards Carlos, like in my taste. But I still, I listen to your drumming, and you're able to play in all different types of settings. And I mean, I think that is the testament of your generation. Is just the idea that you guys.
Well, thanks. I mean, yeah, I worked hard at it. I would study. I've studied a lot of different styles of music as I progressed through my career. I spent many hours studying how to play a country shuffle, for example. I auditioned for Linda Ronstadt once, and this is right before she exploded onto the scene. But she had the hit Silver Threads and Golden Needles, and we started off the audition by playing that, and that's like a rock and roll beat, so I just like nailed it,
Right.
She complimented me. She goes, "Oh, you have a really loud bass drum and a real loud foot on the bass drum." She goes, "We really like that." And I said, "No, really good." And then she called a slow country waltz, and I couldn't play it. I just hadn't played that kind of stuff before. I wasn't that versatile. So I had to learn how to play that, how to play a country shuffle, I auditioned for Dr. John once and did the same thing. I had to learn how to play. I didn't get the job. I couldn't play that second line stuff back then very well.
Wow.
Larry Zach, who I replaced in Jackson Browne's band, got that gig.
With Dr. John.
Incestuous musical scene.
Yeah, what a wild situation. Dude, this is blowing my mind. I mean, so because you were back in Vegas, but Rodney lived out there. He saw Terracotta. He was a fan of you guys, and
right.
the Atlantic. But they did their first album in Muscle Shoals, but then that second album was when you and Carlos joined the band. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. We did that in L.A.
At that point, had you relocated to L.A.?
Where we relocated?
Had you relocated at that point? Like,
yes, they did. Yeah. Well, when John and Mark, Batdorf and Rodney wanted to put a band together, Rick and I came down, and for the first few weeks we slept in they each had two apartments off of Cherokee and Sunset in Hollywood, and I slept in one apartment, and Rick slept in the other.
This is
and then
classic.
We had a management company who rented us a house in West Hollywood, and we all lived at the house. It was like a band house, and we set up all of our equipment in the living room, and we practiced all the time.
Oh, that's so cool.
And basically, that's all we did was eat, sleep, music, and then we went on the road. We did some touring, and then we got ready for the second album. It was a pretty fun time, and we were all, very young and full of a lot of energy.
What did you feel about touring at that time? Like, insofar as
Oh, I was a young man. I couldn't wait to get on the road. One of the reasons, I really truly loved the music, but one of the things, as I look back on it as an older man now, I was very shy kid growing up. I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself in many ways. As a musician, I was pretty confident, but in other ways, I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So being a musician in a working band was a way to meet girls. It was a way, to kind of develop as a person, and that going on the road allowed me to start doing that. And we did really some very unusual tours, but they were with major acts. Our very first tour was with Brent. Remember Brent? Mauceri?
Well, I was. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, and Brent was at that time the biggest band. They had, I think, the highest grossing tour or the highest grossing records. I can't remember, but they had hit after hit after hit after hit. And Batdorf and Rodney, we were an acoustic band, but we were kind of wild. We had these guys with really long hair and beards, and we were very much kind of hippie-looking guys, and our music was not near as commercial as Brad's, and I don't mean that as an insult, because Brad was, in my opinion, was pretty good. But Brad was almost just a little bit more rocky than the Osmond Brothers, you know, and their audience was like that too. We played these concerts in these big venues, and it would be moms and their daughters, you know, and everybody's sitting there all nice and prim, and they would come out and sing.
Fucking cool, man. That is so cool.
And, yeah, it was a mismatch, but we did the whole tour.
I'm sorry, those girls went home. They were having fun, man. That's.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you know, you hit it at that part of the magical spiritual component of music. You don't find that much anymore in this country, anyway. Very difficult to find those. I mean, there's no infrastructure touring wise for that to happen anymore.
No, I think it does. You know, I'm kind of out of the loop of things now. You know, I mean, I still work musically, but mainly it's just little things around town and original things that I write and stuff. So, but I'm guessing if I was 20 years old and I was in an alternative band or a rapper trying to be an up-and-coming guy, that there must be circuits out there. I mean, I know some of my friends still actually. I have a friend who's in a band called Icy Hawks in L.A. I think they just shortened it to Icy Hawks. And he still goes and plays all these little clubs up and down the West Coast, and they go to Europe and they work little clubs.
Yeah, there's I mean, it's smaller. Is it smaller? Or is it just not as to me, there was a commerce-based industry, and that no longer exists. Like the record industry, I mean, the reason that you have, in some ways, identities is through those records. I mean, that's all I listen to. I don't listen to anything else. So through the line, and I you know, this is really, you know, neither here nor there. It's just the idea is that the innocence of playing for the mothers and daughters is just class. You know, that to me, that warms the heart. You know.
Yeah, it was fun. I'll never forget those times. And the guys in Brad, some of them were really nice. I ended up doing some solo work with Jimmy Griffin, who was one of the main guys in Brad. He was kind of like the Bob Weir of Brad, because he was a really talented singer and songwriter. He wrote a song for the Carpenters that won an Oscar for Song of the Year called For All We Know. But whenever they would put his songs out for Brad singles, they tanked. And David Gates always got these number one hit after the other. They stopped putting Jimmy's songs out, and he got to be really depressed. So we did some. He put a solo band together, and I was in that for a while. A very short-lived thing, and he ended up getting into some really heavy-duty drug stuff, and he passed away about 5 years ago. But he made $1 zillion. Got the B-sides of all those hits.
Yeah, I mean,
he had a house up in Mulholland, and he used to dig holes. He was a hillbilly, and he was a great guy, and I loved him to death. But he was, you know, he was a hillbilly. He was from a country guy, and he used to dig holes in his lawn and bury his money in there.
Oh my God.
Yeah, true story.
I love. No, I mean, it's just.
Yeah,
it's just,
I don't know where it was, but Don Henley ended up buying that house up in Mulholland and lived in there for quite a while. Anyway.
Yeah, no. This is so. Talk about like just the idea of once Batdorf and Rodney, you were not in Silver. What did you do?
No, I got kicked out of the band when Silver came along.
Yeah, right. It just Silver. You got bounced out of Silver, and then
yeah, me and Rick did.
And then what did you do directly after that? And then how did? Because that's where I asked Bobby about this too, and he was he's like they were you know, in his typical Bobby way. He's like they were all LA studio guys, you know, and I to me it's fascinating to know. I mean, you just must have been a hot drummer at that time, you know.
Do you mean Bobby Weir or Bobby Cochran?
Bobby Weir.
Bob Weir, yeah. Yeah, after the Silver thing happened, I was really upset. I get really attached to these bands that I'm working with, and Rick and I were bounced out. Rick went back north again. I was married and settled in L.A. at that time, and exactly how long, because that would have been about 74, 75. And I ended up getting the David Blue gig. And I can't even remember how I got that. I think maybe my wife might have known. I don't remember how I got it. I just remember talking to David on the phone. And it probably was through Batdorf and Rodney, because Batdorf and Rodney were on asylum. David Blue was on asylum. So there was a little, because people sort of knew each other.
Absolutely.
The Eagles were on asylum. Jackson was on asylum. So I got the David Blue gig, and they needed a bass player, and I called Rick down, and then Don Felder, who of course later went on to make gazillions of dollars with the Eagles, was the lead guitar player in that band. David and Blue and Don were doing duo gigs, opening for Crosby and Nash, and I think because Graham Nash had produced the album. So it was a similar situation as with Batdorf and Rodney. They'd done an album, they needed to go on the road, and they needed a band. And so the band in this case was Rick and I. And that was another, Jake, I swear to God, I'm going to tell you the story, man. You've probably heard these kind of stories before, but it's another fish out of water deal. The tour we did was with Deep Purple. So David Blue is kind of a folk rocker. He's playing an electric guitar, and he's trying to sing rock, and he'd written that song.
I know.
Kind of a rock song. But they put us with Deep Purple. Deep Purple was at the height of their career. Smoke on the Water was a top 10 record, and that's what we went on the road with. For that. And David was really nervous, and it was a good band, but it just didn't fit. It was too country and too folky, and Deep Purple is a kick-ass rock band. They're great, and back then they were just phenomenal. I saw them in several shows, and that was our first tour, and then we did a tour with Joan Baez. No, I'm take it back. That was with Danny O'Keefe. So I think we just did that one tour with them, and then David, they lost the funding for it, and they went back to just working as a duo.
Wow, that is funny. Did you? So then, who called you? Did Weir call you directly to offer you the gig?
Well, the Weir thing came a little bit later. I went from David Blue to Jackson Browne, and I thought
that was like earlier. I thought the Jackson Browne stuff was like.
Yeah, I went to work for Jackson in '76 and worked with him for a year.
Wow.
And then that's where I worked with David Lindley. And then Lindley had recommended me. Actually, he recommended me for the Jerry Garcia band. Garcia was looking for a drummer, and David had, I guess, talked to them. I don't know if he talked to Jerry or talked to the management company, and recommended me. Bless his heart. And the management company called me, and they sent me all the Garcia albums. They told me to start listening to them and learning the stuff. And so that's what I was doing. And then I got a call later on saying that Jerry had decided to use somebody else.
Yeah, like Buzz Buchanan or something.
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah.
That I think he was a friend of John Kahn.
John Kahn, yeah.
And John was in Jerry's band. And so I didn't get that. But right away after that, I got a call from Weir's people, or maybe from Weir himself, I don't remember. And Bob had wanted to do that. He had just finished that album, Heaven Help the Fool. And so he needed to put a band together. That's the story of my life. People finish an album, they need to put a band together.
It's fascinating because that album, Heaven Help the Fool, I just wish that you and Carlos cut that album. It's really fascinating because it's all other studio cats. It's like that
would have been fun. I wish we would have too. That would have been great, and I wish we would have continued to work with Bob. But getting involved in that whole Grateful Dead thing was really, really interesting, as you can imagine. Kind of getting inside that thing. Can you
talk a little bit about that?
I'd be glad to. The Bob Weir thing only lasted about 6 months, but it was a lot of fun. Bob and the Dead are huge on the East Coast, so we were doing a lot of big shows on the East Coast and the smaller shows everywhere else. but we didn't go overseas or anything like that. And Bob was happy, and he talked about wanting to do more. And he talked then about not being, kind of like what I was saying about Jimmy Griffin. He just wasn't really getting enough out of the Dead. But I thought, oh, maybe he's going to quit and start a solo band, and we'll be in that band. But none of that happened, and he went back, of course, to touring with the Dead, and I certainly don't blame him for that. I mean, it's a great creative thing, and it's a humongous paycheck. And back then they were really at the top of their form, in my opinion, musically, and they were playing huge shows. And then Brent, I'd gotten Brent in the band because he'd worked with and before the Silver, it was the John Batdorf band, and Rick had actually brought Brent down into the band, into the Batdorf thing, and then I recommended Brent to Bob. And then we did these shows. The Bob Weir band did shows with the Jerry Garcia band. We did, I think, about a half a dozen of them.
Sure. Right.
Bob and Jerry both got to hear Brent play. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
No. I'm just trying to.
Okay.
Okay,
so they.
Yeah.
Like I said, I get excited and I'll just ramble on.
No. I'm just trying to get it in my you have an incredible way of getting these stories to go fast forward, reverse. I'm trying to. So you met Brent in the John Batdorf band. That was the first.
Brent, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. John and Mark Rodney had split up, and John was looking to pursue a solo thing. He had the management company, Hartman and Goodman, who'd split off from Geffen and Roberts, backing him, and so Rick and I and Brent and John were at the heart of this new band. And then we were rehearsing, and for some reason, which I totally don't understand right now, I still don't understand it, the management company wanted to remove Rick and I and keep Brent and John, of course. John was a singer-songwriter, and put Harry Stenson on drums and Tom Ledden, Bernie Ledden's brother, on bass. And they were both, fine musicians. They didn't really, except for Harry's singing, which was really pretty phenomenal. There wasn't that much of a difference, though. And then they went and made that album for him.
When I talked to Batdorf about that, he said that that you guys played an audition with your band, that band that you were talking about.
That's true, we did, yeah.
And just blew them out of the room. And Clive's like, let's do a record. And then along the way, they were like, let's put together a superstar band and bring these two cats in. And I'm like, why would you replace the two guys, the rhythm section that's just cooking, they're just so super tight. And the album, I have the album because of Brent, but it's like,
right.
It lacks that spark, man. It's
really uneven. I mean, it's got that ridiculous song. It was a top 10 single.
Wham Bam.
Wham Bam Shang-a-Lang, and it was embarrassing, and it kind of, it's like you get sort of typecast. I mean, they went behind it and promoted it, I know, but nothing else could happen. It was just, in my opinion, a very misguided thing.
No.
And Harry, I went in and worked with Tom Ledden a lot later on in the 80s. We worked together a lot. He's a very nice guy. And Harry, I know a little bit, and he's a very nice guy, too. And he's working with, he's been with Marty Stewart in Nashville for a long, long time.
Sure.
So they're both doing good.
But
anyway, I forget where I was. We were talking about Brent and
what did you, when you first met Brent and started playing with him, what were your impressions of him as a player?
Oh, I knew immediately that he was a really good player. He was, I mean, it was obvious. It's like, it's like, I don't even know how to explain it. He was one of the best players I'd ever worked with. He had incredible chops, but more important, I'd worked with guys with incredible chops, and still have. He just played stuff that fit perfectly. He had an excellent ear, and he also sang his ass off. He was a really good singer. So I was really impressed with him right away.
Oh, that's great. Did you guys become you guys basically did a lot of songwriting together?
No, I wasn't writing back then at all. I hadn't started writing yet. I don't think he was either. He was pretty young, and he hadn't done a whole lot of gigs and stuff like that. And he was wanting to get on the road and do all that, live that rock and roll lifestyle too.
Exactly. So Carlos brought him down, but Brent had never. This was his maiden voyage. You guys had already been out on the road, but Brent hadn't been out there yet.
No, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure he hadn't. He was a little bit younger than I was.
All right. So then Bobby's management or Bobby himself, they reached out to you, and that's where Jerry and Bob got to hear Brent play. But I'm really interested in this the world of the dead you're talking about. To me, they're never seeing the band, being born in '78. There is something very spiritual within that community, but I know there's also it was like this dreaded force, it was just a force, and I just or whatever, and I think it would be important.
Oh yeah, it is like a culture.
Yeah, well, especially
a culture unto itself. It was very interesting, and I used to be a Grateful Dead fan when I was a kid back in the '60s. I even went to a show in '68 at the convention center, and I remember playing Anthem of the Sun over and over and over on my stereo, and being into that, and then I kind of lost it. I kind of drifted away into more hard rocky, more melodic, more mainstream kind of rock and roll bands. And so hooking up with Bob was doing more mainstream stuff back then, and then I kind of got exposed to the whole Dead thing, and I kind of understood it better, and then just seeing what went on, it was really bizarre, and Brent's induction into the Dead, and then he was with them, as you know, for 10 years. He had songs on albums, and he was a big, he did the Dylan tour and all that stuff. But then Brent, I saw him spiraling downhill really bad, and it appeared to me that nobody was doing anything about it. And at that point, I was also filled with the fire enthusiasm of a guy who had dealt with his own addiction issues, or was dealing with them myself, because I had gotten really heavy into drugs in the later part of my music career. It was one of the things that was leading to my demise, at least temporarily.
You're pretty sharp right now, man.
I tried to help Brent, and I wasn't successful.
What year was that?
Well, the whole Weir thing started.
No. I want to just hit on this when Brent was spiraling. Was it 89?
Oh, he and I both, even when we were young, we used to do a lot of drinking. We were doing cocaine and smoking weed and stuff like that too. When it came, somebody always had weed. And when we had money, we would have cocaine. We didn't, but we always drank. And our drinking just continued. And as he became successful, in the Bob Weir band, he was, we were he's probably making $1,000 a week or something like that, and I was making a little bit more. And so we didn't have a lot of money to spend on that stuff, but we had enough to drink, and so we would drink pretty heavily. We always kept it together for the gigs, but other times we would go a little crazy. Yeah. And then when the Dead thing happened and he became a member of the band, he became very wealthy pretty fast, and he just started really increasing all that stuff. And at the beginning, I was still using too, and I would visit him. I'd go to shows, and we would do lots of cocaine and lots of alcohol, and then I would go home and be poor again and not be able to afford it. But he always could afford it, and he lost his license, and he lost his family, and then he lost his life. And I was very mad at the Grateful Dead at the time, because, and I used to talk to John McIntyre, who was their road manager and a friend of mine back then. He was just a great, great guy.
Wow, I've wow. That's
You know John?
No, man. I read this book about the Dead in '84. I love John McIntyre. Like he was trying.
I have to read that. I haven't read that. I didn't even know he wrote a book.
No. He's mentioned because the morale was low, and they brought him on as road manager, and he just had he's a special guy.
Right.
I would love to talk to that cat.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy.
Yeah.
He's a really sweet guy, and very smart too, and he'd be a really good interview.
No, dude, you're blowing my mind right now. I mean, because this.
Okay.
I mean, this is because it bothers me when you talk about what you would see go on there, or sort of the.
Yeah, it was no secret. I mean, there was a lot of drug use going on in that band, and not everybody had problems with it. But it's acknowledged that Garcia did, and it was affecting his health. And I saw it at the very end, and at the very end, it was ugly. I mean, there were some really healthy people there, but if you saw Garcia near the end of his life when he was still using, it was a really scary sight. I mean, his skin wasn't a normal color. It was a real weird, sickly green.
I want to go back. I want to go back for a minute when Brent joined the band, started to have a lot of monetary.
Joined the Dead, you mean?
Joined the Dead, and started to have a lot of monetary success, and then.
Yes.
Are you talking about the early '80s?
Yeah, that would have been the early '80s.
And so,
I don't remember exactly when he joined, but the Weir thing was '78, and so it might even have been '79 because I think he got into the Dead pretty quickly after the Weir thing ended.
And just the
well, wasn't it that Keith Godchow, did he get?
No. You're spot on. Brent joined the band in '79. Godchow died a year later in a car.
A year later,
in a car wreck.
Godchow was out of control. He was having some real serious issues, and Brent came in and replaced him.
But you guys would party a lot when you would see him when he joined the band.
Brent was living up in the Bay Area at the time, but I used to go up. Like I said, I worked on his solo album, and I used to, whenever the Dead would come to town, I would go, go see the show and hang out, and I used to go up, and I was still doing some touring too. So whenever I would go to the Bay Area, I would usually stay with him because he had a big house in Pleasantville or something like that. I don't remember where it was.
But he had his family was intact at that time. It was just wasn't it towards the end where things just unraveled, or was it because there's a show.
His family at that time was still intact. His wife and his 2 daughters. You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were still together. Later on, by that point, I was kind of out of the picture a little bit. And later on, his wife and left him and took the 2 girls, and it was really sad and ugly. And he was just he was really spiraling down.
What could they have done?
I don't know. That's what McIntyre said. I kept saying they should have done something. They should have stopped. They should have. John was saying. John said that they believe very much in personal responsibility, and as long as people are. I mean, I don't mean to put words in his mouth. I know.
I'm with you, man. That's what they did. They did.
Yeah.
I mean, they let Garcia. They let Garcia go to that point. To the point where he should have been.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Jerry Garcia should have been dead 10 years before he died. I mean, they let him go. They didn't have an intervention with Garcia till like 85.
Right. Yeah.
And
I don't know. I wasn't really good friends with Mickey or Phil or Bob and I were friends, but I never really talked to him about that.
What did you? I mean, how great was? Yeah, how great was it to work with Weir? I mean, it does. I just want your own take on, like, the first time.
I found Bob really easy to work with. He was really exciting. He was a very nice guy. He loved playing the music. He loved rocking out. He loved to play like the old songs, the Chuck Berry songs. He liked doing his original stuff too. My impression of him was that he was a little bit distracted. I mean, he wanted to make this record happen, and I think when it wasn't taken off the way that he would like it to take off, I mean, I think it did well. I'm sure he recouped his money on it, but it didn't produce any hit singles or anything like that. And I think he kind of got. I think he was distracted by the whole. The Dead is such a huge undertaking. To be a part of it, it's a big machine. It's a big machine, and it demands. If you're going to be a part of it, it demands quite a bit of your time. And I think he just got distracted by that a lot.
Yeah,
but I really enjoyed working with Bob.
To me, that band. I mean, I'm going to send you a couple of these shows. This show from the Palladium.
Oh, great. Yeah.
The show from the Palladium, March 8th, 1978. Guys are cooking.
Yeah, that was funny because we were actually supposed to do that show on a Saturday, and we flew into a blizzard, and they wouldn't let the plane land. So we had to go to Canada, and then we had to postpone the show from Saturday and did it on a Tuesday.
You know what? I always wonder. I'm like, what? But I can listen to the show now, and I can be like, dude, I know Mauceri so well. Man. I can just hear, dude, because that band was cooking, man.
You say my name right too, Mauceri. That's good. Yeah, I know Mauceri really well.
Yeah, really well, man. Did you after that first tour, you and Carlos, you were not part of the band after that?
With Bob, you mean?
Yeah, with
Bob
Weir.
Weir?
Yeah, with Weir.
No, he wanted to do something different. He kept Bobby and Brent, and he got Billy Cobham, the jazz drummer, and I think it was Alphonse Mouzon was the bass player.
Alfonso Johnson. Yeah. Alfonso Johnson.
Yeah. 2 heavyweight jazzers, and they formed Bobby and the Midnights. And that band worked. I think they worked for a couple of years.
Oh, definitely. No, no doubt about it. I also interviewed last week. It's kind of funny, Kenny Gradney.
You did who? I'm sorry.
Kenny Gradney, the bass player.
Gradney?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And he was in the Midnights too after.
Oh, he was in that band too for a while.
After Alfonso Johnson left the band,
okay.
He took over. But yeah, no, I mean Billy Cobham and I, we speak somewhat regularly. Actually, I've been pretty inspiring to him. I did 2 major interviews with him, and
God, what a monster drummer he is.
Yeah, but I also
he's the guy who wanted to beat Buddy Rich.
That's such a great call, man. I said I never wanted to take on Buddy Rich. Billy Cobham took on Buddy Rich and went even a little bit further. I saw him in Return to Forever back at the Whiskey a Go-Go when they first broke, and I had to leave the room. It was too intense for me. It was Mahavishnu Orchestra, you mean?
Yeah, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, yeah.
It was too much. Yeah, I would have died.
It was. They were really loud, and the Whiskey's a pretty small room. And Billy, it was just that, they're playing that modern fusion jazz, and it was just too intense. I mean, I'm a little folk rock drummer,
Did you play with the Flying Burrito Brothers in the?
Yes, I did. I did a couple of tours with them.
Can you talk about playing with Sneaky Pete and Bobby Cochran? Really.
Yeah, Bobby Cochran wasn't in the band. How did I get that gig? I was still doing drugs back then, so I don't remember a lot of stuff.
Sure.
But I did get a call to do some dates with them in California, and so I did. I didn't know anything about them. I mean, I knew a little bit about them. I used to have the Gilded Palace of Sin, and like I said, I was a Byrds fan, but I wasn't a big Burritos fan. I'd kind of drifted away from that kind of music when Graham Parsons started the Burritos. Later on, I got really into it. But anyway, I got a call to work with them, and we did a tour up and down the Pacific Coast. And the band at that point was, the only original was Sneaky Pete, and he was just as cool as could be. He was a sweetheart of a guy. And it was Skip Batten from the Byrds, and John Beelan was the guitar player who had been out with Dolly Parton before that, and he was really good. And then Gib Gilboa, who had been in the band for a long time, and he was a Cajun guy who played fiddle and guitar. And we did all those songs, and then we did a tour. We did some more tours of the West, and then we did a tour of Italy. We went to Italy, and we did a tour up and down Italy. And that was about it. That's all I did with them.
And then
I don't think they did a whole lot after that. I think they kind of packed it up. I think they might have done something in Nashville, and then they packed it up. But I got to play all those songs, and I got introduced to them, and I remember playing Hickory Wind and thinking, this is a great song, to myself. and the Christine song, The Devil in Disguise, and
I love that too.
Just loving it. Yeah. And then I got into Graham big time. Amy Lou Harris was starting to happen, and she was doing all those songs, and I went back and revisited all that stuff and very much fell in love with it. And I could see why Keith Richards, and some of the Rolling Stones were really attracted to him too, because he really did have a certain kind of magical spark, I would say.
Yeah, no, there's sometimes these people, for me it's a little bit late, and like I'm beginning to discover that magic about Lowell George right now. Never was into that before, but he was another character, another kind of transcendental figure for me. He's just become, but in about '82, Brent called you up and asked you to work on his solo gig.
Yeah, I think it was around there,
right?
Around '82, and he told me. At that point,
I have demos of that.
Pardon?
I have copies of that. That's awesome. That you're the drummer on that, all that stuff.
Oh, have you heard it?
It's incredible.
Yeah, I am the drummer on. I believe on all of it. I don't think they used anybody else, and it was kind of funny because I said, "Well, do you want to use Rick on that?" And for some reason, which I didn't question, he didn't. He wanted me to pick a bass player that I've been working with a lot. He says, pick somebody from LA that you've been working with a lot. And I've been working with this guy, Paul Marshall Solomon, he's in that band, Icy Hawks, which is an original band out of LA.
Right.
Kind of doing that sort of burritos-ish kind of music. And so I got Paul on the gig, and Paul and I flew up to the Bay Area, and then went over to Navato over there, and actually, we stayed in Brent's house. He still lived I think he lived in his parents' house. His parents, I think, had passed, but left him the house back then. But we recorded at the Grateful Dead studio in San Rafael.
Oh, this is
and
classic. You went to
3 week process. I think we went up and down a couple of times, back and forth to LA and the Bay Area. And he was dating the engineer girl, Betty Cantor Jackson, I think her name was.
Brent was.
And she was, Brent was at that time. It was before he met his wife. And she had worked on some of the Dead projects or maybe solo projects and stuff like that. And she was a really good engineer. And we cut up there at that same studio that they cut a lot of their stuff at. And we, hung out with Phil Lesh a little bit and with Mickey Hart. And, they were really, really nice guys, and some of those their crazy road crew up there.
Yeah, Kid Candelario.
We were a lot of drugs. A lot of drugs.
So Brent was living in, this had to have been like 80, do we have a year on the 80, I think it's 82.
I'm sorry, say that again, Jake.
I'm really just trying to hone in on, you're making me crazy, man, because he was dating Betty Cantor Jackson, but I already thought he was married at that point. You're saying he was not?
No, I may be getting my years mixed up. He wasn't married. He was dating her, and he didn't have anything else going. He hadn't bought in that big house yet, and hadn't had his kids.
Wow.
So I may be getting the years mixed up. I don't want to.
No, you're spot on, because Phil Phil, there's a story. I was reading these anecdotes again. Now, Mauceri, I know you're the drummer on that, but I was reading this stuff where Lesh was in the studio listening to Betty Cantor Jackson do these demos for Brent, and I'm like, so it all fits together, and it all happened in '82, and Phil was in there and he was laughing, he was loving it, he was having he thought it was great. He loved.
Oh, good. Yeah, he was a real sweet guy. I really liked him a lot. Yeah, it was a good time, and it was fun music. And Brent was, he was a pretty solid writer. And some of those songs they cut with the Dead as well, like that. I can't remember exactly the title, but 10,000 Tons of Steel.
Yeah, exactly. Tons of Steel.
We recut it. Yeah, Tons of Steel, and then some of the stuff, was not kind of my cup of tea, but some of it was pretty good.
Yeah,
and he was an incredible singer. And he was a real good rock singer, man, and he was singing his ass off back then.
He has to me, I mean, I can say this to Brent, he'll hear this, it's just, some of his tunes are okay, I'm not crazy about his songwriting. The guy, what you said before, though, about his playing, I mean, he was just a genius at finding, he was. He was. He never overplayed, he never overplayed, ever.
No, but he had incredible chops. But that's what I said earlier. But he always played the right thing. He had a really good ear. Now, his musical influences growing up as a kid were the jazzers. He was really into Jan Hammer. He was into some of that East Bay stuff that I was talking about, those were pretty heavy musicians, and the guys in Tower of Power and Sons of Champlin and stuff like that. I mean, he was really into that. I think Brian Auger and kind of the progressive rock thing.
You're making my year.
You never got a chance to meet him, because the other side of Brent was, as good as he was musically, he was almost in many ways inept socially.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's told you that before.
No, I can already feel it just by when I see, he's just it's not a comfortable thing.
Yeah, we used to talk about it, me and Rick and other people that knew him, and it was like all of his energy, we're guessing.
Yeah.
And now I'm a therapist years later,
Yeah.
Still guessing at his psychology, but it seemed like all of his energy went into music. And, we used to fantasize that he must have locked himself in his room after school every day and studied and practiced and never did anything else, And so he comes out as this really good musician, but he had a really hard time relating to people. He had a hard time expressing himself. He would become frustrated real easy. And that might have led to some of the drinking too.
It's really, I'm just, it confounds me to hear you say that, and I know it's the absolute truth. And it's unfortunate to me that, I just figured he was probably, I guess I could talk to Rick about this, but it's just more about the lack of patience, getting frustrated easily. What warms my heart about what you said is that I always wanted to believe that he really dug the funk, the jazz, because that's what I hear in his playing. And for you to tell me
really does what?
It's fine. He dug the jazzers. He loved the jazzers. He loved the funk.
Oh yeah, he did. He could sit down and play like Jimmy Smith stuff and things like that, like it was nothing. He could lay down nice little shuffle. We used to do. He actually was around when Mark Rodney was still in the band at the very beginning, and Mark Rodney was a heavy, jazz influenced guy from his father. We used to do some really nice little jazz things, and Rick could play it, and I was learning how to play it. We used to have a lot of fun playing that.
What would you play? Would you play like Headhunter stuff, or were you just playing like just jazz? Just.
Oh, we would just be jamming, around blues changes or something like that.
Where are the tapes? Style. Where are the tapes of that? I think we need the tapes of that.
I'm sorry, say that again. I'm having a hard time hearing.
We need the tapes. We need tapes of that. Recordings of that.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's anything that I'm aware of. Dead might have some, they might have done that. Some of that might be out there.
Yeah, yeah. So, talk a little bit about, you know, in the early '80s, you still did a lot of session work in the Southern California area.
Yeah, I had a couple accounts, people who used me a lot. There was a guy named Ray Ruff who was a country guy. I started doing some country work. The Burritos led me to the Dillards. Remember the Dillards from the Andy Griffith Show?
Right.
And I worked with them. I did a couple tours with those guys, and it led me to Hoyt Axton.
Oh, wow.
And I worked with Hoyt Axton for about a year. And that was when I was getting at the end of my road tours. I was drinking and using a lot, and I couldn't do it anymore. I took some time off for a while. And then I finally ended up getting myself straight and sober.
Can you talk about? Would you mind talking about that, overcoming that adversity?
Sure. Yeah, I would be glad to.
Yeah.
I think I said earlier that as a child I was very shy and insecure in some ways, and I'd had a kind of a troubled childhood. Like I said earlier, I was a product of divorce, and even though my stepfather was a real positive influence on me, my mother was married 3 times, and she kept picking these insecure men to marry.
Right.
And then some of them were alcoholics and so forth and so on. And I just didn't have a really solid growing up experience. And there was some other little bits of abuse that went on there too that I won't go into in detail. But I physically I sort of came out of that okay. But deep inside I had some little neuroses, some things that just wouldn't go away. And the drinking and the drugs, kind of helped deal with them. And they weren't really conscious that much early on, but they were there. And it was always, kind of to put it in a nutshell, it was always the feeling like, not really good enough, not just in music, but just in anything. And I'm really kind of faking it. And sooner or later I'm going to get found out. It didn't matter what it was. And so it led to these kind of acting out behaviors of drinking and drugging, and later on I was married and I was cheating on my wife and all that kind of rock and roll stuff. And it just kind of, but I was so dedicated to music and to drumming and to the people I worked for, and I worked for, as you know, some real heavyweights, and I wanted to please them and do a good job, that I always really kept it together. But the thing about addiction is that, it always is working on you, so slowly over the course of 20 years, I became less and less careful, and I remember, doing really stupid things on major stages with major artists because I was too drunk or too high. Wow. And it was, it was affecting the kind of work I was getting, and so finally, it just continued getting worse and worse, and I was using more and more, and I became very unhappy. And I was, wrecking my cars, and my wife and I were fighting all the time, and it just dawned on me once after a car accident, I think, that maybe I have a problem. And then I started looking at it, and I eliminated the cocaine, and I just drank and smoked weed, and then I eliminated the alcohol. I identified that as a problem, and I doubled my weed smoking, but I still wasn't happy, and I said, I'm just going to have to stop doing everything. And so I got some help. I went and got therapy, and my therapist made me do 12 steps, which I didn't want to do, but in the long run, it ended up helping me a lot. And then, I just slowly put it back together bit by bit, and I went back to music, and I did really well still in music afterwards. But by that point, I had been divorced and remarried, and that's when I said, well, I got to be able to do something else. I was getting to be in my late 30s, I think, and I wanted to have something else I could fall back on, and that's when I went into doing the kind of work I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Went back to school and started doing all that.
Well, I think we're going to wrap up part 1, man. You kind of blew my mind.
Okay, man.
You blew my mind, man.
It's been great.
Yeah, you're fantastic. You just really,
oh, thank
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm really it's special to hear about some of this stuff. So we'll pick it up like soon, like maybe this next week or something. I'll reach out to you. I'll let you know.
Okay, that'll be great. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's an honor to talk to you. I feel honored that you think that my stories are interesting, and I think they are. When I talk to other people that are into the scene around here, they like them too. So it's really nice to share them with somebody.
Well, it just
as far away as you are, and somebody you who have interviewed all these incredible people.
Yeah, but I would be nowhere with. I mean, truthfully, I would be nowhere without the foundation of you guys. You know, that's where the show started. Slowly, it built up to a point now where, you know, I mean, next year will be the year of monetization. We'll see if I can get to syndicate. That's where I'm going. You know, and that's
okay,
and so just keep praying, bro, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Bob. I really appreciate it.
All right, take it easy, man.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show. Joined here, part 2, with John Mauceri. John, welcome back.
Thank you, Jake. Good to be with you.
My show is predicated on the 4 L's. The first L is leadership. I was hoping you could talk about what you believe good leadership qualities are, and if you could cite an example of that in your career.
I'm sorry. What about leadership?
Can you tell me what you think are good qualities of leadership?
Oh.
And then use an example in your career of somebody who you considered a great leader, maybe because they used their unorthodox style, anything.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think about it as a musician and about since I've been working outside of music. In music, well, at least from my perspective, there's always been driven people, people with a dream or with an incredible desire to accomplish something, and the ways that they do it is generally they're self-motivated, and they're just burning with this desire to do it, and then they bring other people along with them.
Uh-huh.
That's, I think, in the creative fields you see a lot of that. I mean, not everybody that's in the creative arts is a instigator, so to speak. In the Beatles, you had Lennon and McCartney. You had 2 of them. And in any band, like I think of Creedence Clearwater, you have like John Fogerty. You have these kind of clear, driven people that are pushing the whole thing forward with incredible energy, and it just takes an incredible amount of energy and an incredible amount of persistence to get something like that going off the ground. And, we're talking about the Grateful Dead, and I think it's the same thing there. I'm not sure who the creative driver of that was. I mean, not so much the creative driver, but what the energy was to make sure that happened. I have to be back there in the beginning of that band to know, but once it gets going, then the whole energy process of keeping a band going is then shared by a whole bunch of people in what we call the music business, right?
Yeah, right.
Managers, road managers, and deadlines for record companies and all that stuff. That was the case back when I was doing it. But in the beginning, before anything happens, it's one person. And those people tend to be leaders. They have qualities that inspire other people. People can see it like even without realizing it, and think, hey, this is a good guy for me to hitch my wagon to. So I think the successful people like that, the people that make it in the field, they have that quality. They see it in themselves, and then they can temper it, to be effective for a career,
right?
For a whole career.
Right.
And the ones that have been unsuccessful but still have that energy and that quality are driven. They're so driven that they're single-minded, they're myopic, and they burn people out, and they don't see it that they're doing it, and they can drive people crazy. I've worked a little bit with both of those kinds of people.
You did?
Yeah, I think so.
who was inspirational? Who was the person that inspired you, like a leader that you worked with, and why?
Yeah, there's a few of them.
Yeah.
John Batdorf was that kind of guy back in the early days for me, because I wasn't that, you know, this was kind of my first experience with a real driven guy who was also pretty together. You know, he had a vision. He didn't. I mean, he did a little bit of drinking, a little bit of drugs, but by no means did he have a problem with it. Nothing got in the way of his plan. And, despite the fact that they never really had much success, Batdorf and Rodney, you know, their first album was on Atlantic Records, produced by Ahmet Ertegun.
I know.
And that's
it's unreal.
Pretty big feat. Yeah, and their second album was on Asylum, and I think it was within one of the first 10 albums released on Asylum Records, which of course.
If you read, it's funny. I was reading his bio the other day, and it took, he had to keep going at it. It took him a few tries to get Ahmet to finally sign off on it. He really, they had to work their asses off. They didn't.
They did, but that's a persistence. John had the smarts and kind of the tenaciousness, and the maybe even being inexperienced. I can't think of the right words, but being inexperienced and unknowledgeable about the business. He said, "Oh, what the hell? I'm just going to go to the biggest guy." And he did go to the biggest guy, and Ahmet Ertegun producing one record. He had Clive Davis doing another. So he was like that. There's another guy I worked with later on that we haven't talked about yet, a guy named Pete Anderson. And Pete Anderson is a guitar player, producer. He produced, his biggest claim to fame is he produced Dwight Yoakam. He produced all the Dwight Yoakam hits and records, and he played guitar on all the records. He's a great guitar player. And he produced Michelle Shock and the Meat Puppets from Arizona, and quite a few other bands. But he had his biggest success by far with Dwight Yoakam. And Pete was like that too. He has a vision. Nothing is going to get in the way. He sees it. He knows he's got it, and he's just going to keep going. And him and Dwight Yoakam did that. They made their success completely outside of Nashville. And one of the things that Pete told me later on, because we worked together on a lot of different projects, he told me that they didn't know that they couldn't do that. They didn't know that they couldn't make a record outside of Nashville. They didn't know that wasn't allowed. They didn't know that they could make a record with themselves, with their own musicians, and not have to use the Nashville studio musicians. That ignorance worked for them, and I think John Batdorf kind of was the same way.
Yeah, that's cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm always looking for the unorthodox. I think that at the end of the day, you put together tenaciousness, hard work, inspiration, and passion, and then you get magic. And then magic, it's very hard to get, but once you get it, it comes easily. And you hit that little streak, or it could be a long streak, like the Grateful Dead. They chewed up keyboard players, and they almost killed themselves. But that band stayed together, kept their egos in check for decades. I mean, that to me is longevity. So, but that's magic. And Batdorf and Rodney were on fire. The thing is, I'm still confused because when I interviewed Batdorf, he said that Brent and you played on Life Is You, the last album that they cut on Arista or Asylum. Is that true?
Arista. Brent played on it? Yeah, he did. I believe he did. I think so.
He's not credited on the album at all.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because John said that he did too.
I think I still have that record. I have to go look at that. I know there were two. There was one, the single for sure. None of them played on, and there might have been two things cut.
It's really weird, man, because his name is nowhere to be found on Life Is You, and John said he played on that album. It's
Batdorf.
Batdorf said that, yeah, and he said, he goes, Brent made a great third part harmony guy. He played really strong organ. But I'll ask you about specifically how long did your relationship with Weir last? Bob Weir, did it go? Did it stop after you toured with him, or did you continue to stay in touch?
Well, we stayed in touch a little bit. It fell apart after the band. He ended that band, and then I don't remember exactly how long. I don't think it was very much longer. Within 6 months or so, he was putting together Bobby and the Midnight.
Sure.
And I remember, I think the last time I saw him was maybe in the early 80s, and I went to see, he was playing with Kingfish, which was that band that he worked with on and off.
Yeah, with Matt Kelly.
Years. Yeah, right. And I went to see him at the Golden Bear in Huntington Beach.
That's classic.
Just a great club that's not there anymore. But we hung out and talked a little bit, and that was it. I didn't have any contact with him at all. And it's funny because they have this National Association of Music Manufacturers Convention.
Yeah, the NAMM show. Yeah.
Every year, and I know that Bob was a endorsee of Ibanez guitars and stuff. And every time I go to the NAMM show, I ask if he's going to be there, and he never is.
Yes.
And then I heard some unfortunate things about him, that he'd gotten a real heavy drinking problem, and there was stuff like where he was doing a show and he was like falling down on stage and stuff like that. You probably heard about that stuff.
Well, I just I was really tickled to death to be able to hang with Bobby, and he's definitely a very brilliant guy. But it's this whole all these concentric circles. So tell me about your definition of love. What is your concept of love?
Wow, my concept of love. Well, in the most basic sense of the word, it's a emotion that exists for reasons that I'm not even totally sure of why. When I think of my wife, and I think of my son, and I think of not all of my family, but some of them, and I think of some of my friends, and I think of my relationship with music, which has been oftentimes very much love-hate. But when I think about things that are just the most important things to me, and there's this feeling in me about wanting to be with them and look at them and it making me smile, picking up my nice acoustic guitar and hearing the tone of it and how it sounds, sitting down at a really nice piano or a really nice drum set in a nice sounding room and hearing those tones and the sounds of those things, and it fills me with a joy and a connectedness to it, and a connectedness to these people. And maybe I'm insulting my wife and son by equating them to musical instruments, but to me, I'm meaning to compliment them, and people that I've met in my life. It's not a whole lot of people, but there are people in my life that that I love, and I have definitely loved. That's probably about the best I can do to define it.
Do you believe that in order to play real music, you need to actually physically leave your body?
Do you need to play? Sorry, say that again.
If you're going to play truly authentic, real music in a group setting, you have to be willing to leave your physical body.
I got everything except for something body.
Physical body. You have to leave your physical body.
Leave your physical body?
Yes.
That's a great question. That's a great question.
Stanley Clark said that. Yeah, go ahead.
Who said it?
Stanley Clark said if you're the only true music is music where you physically, you're comfortable enough to leave your physical body.
That's the highest high of playing music for me is when I'm having so much fun, it feels like I'm floating. Oftentimes, I'll close my eyes, and there's a whole school of thought where you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be looking at each other and watching each other and playing off of each other, and that's true too. But there's a time as a drummer where I feel so in the groove, and I'm not meaning to pat myself on the back. It's me and the other musicians that it's so right that it's just sublime, and I don't leave my body, but I feel kind of like I'm floating, and it's the highest high of music, and that's different than the high of being on stage and having a whole bunch of people screaming for you. That's a high too. I mean, that feels great, but you still can just be like learning the songs and kind of going through the motions, and you don't quite own them yet,
Yeah, exactly.
But there's a high about being in that groove, man, that's addicting, and it can happen in the dirtiest, darkest, dingiest clubs, where you're making $40 a night.
How did you originally meet John McEntire?
How did I meet him?
Yeah.
He was on the road with Bob Weir. He was our road manager.
And he, but then did you struck up a relationship with him right away?
I loved John McEntire. I was immediately attracted to him. I thought he was a really cool guy. He was educated. He had a lot of qualities that I wish that I would have had that I got when I got a little bit older, maybe. He was really easy to talk to. He was funny, witty. He was just a guy I really looked up to.
That's awesome.
He was real interesting. Can I tell you a real quick story?
Yeah, I'd love a John McEntire story.
It might have even been in Tucson. I don't remember where it was. We were in a gig, and it was us. I think there was an opening band, and it was at a smaller venue, like it was a West Coast thing, so it was probably held maybe 1,500, 2,000 people or something like that. And we had done the sound check, and not John, but another, John was like the main guy, and there was he had an assistant under him who had a briefcase full of money. And we just started this tour, so there was a lot of money in this briefcase. And the guy had set it down somewhere, and I'm sure I'm getting some of this story wrong. This is just kind of how I remember it. And it got stolen. And it was in the middle of the afternoon, and then the guy came up to John and said, okay, the briefcase is gone with, $15,000 in it or whatever it was. I don't remember what it was exactly, but it was a lot of money, and it was our operating money, for the start of the tour. And people were kind of freaking out. Oh my God. And John kept his cool, and he says, oh, that's okay. He goes, is everybody here who was here? He goes, all right. Everybody from all the bands and all the road crews, he brought everybody together, and he said, okay, this is what happened. We had a briefcase that was taken, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go sit over. I'm going to have the band continue doing their sound check. I'm going to go sit out in the audience, and I want, and in 2 hours, I'm going to go back downstairs where that briefcase was, and I want to see it there with all the money in it. I swear to God, that's what he did.
Wait, that Batdorf said that?
And they put it back. Whoever it was put it back with all the money, and he got the money back. So we never knew who did it. It could have been one of our own guys, even,
Wow.
But, wow. He came back.
That's a great story, man.
Yeah, I know. It was really cool. And he just kept us cool about the whole thing. He didn't get upset. And he didn't make any threats. I don't remember exactly what he said. It was a long time ago, but that was the gist of it. Anyway, yeah, I was very much like him.
Wow.
And he moved to L.A. for a while. He was trying to get a career as an actor, and we hung out a little bit. I was living in Hollywood at the time, and we hung out together a little bit.
what is something about life that you've learned, or how has music helped you evolve in other phases of your life?
I'm sorry, say that again, Jake?
How has music helped you evolve in other phases of your life?
How has music helped me evolve in other things in my life?
In other phases.
Other phases?
Phases of your life, yeah.
In other phases of my life. Well, my relationship with music hasn't been. It hasn't. I've never really looked at it that way. Music was my driving force, kind of how I was describing people before, where they have a driving thing. I mean, it was the thing that I lived for when I discovered it. When I discovered drums and the fun of working with other musicians and bands, and then the attention that I got playing drums, and then I could actually talk to girls and do things like that, and the confidence that it gave me, it played that kind of role, and then it continued along that way, and then it actually kind of turned against me, but it didn't turn against me. It's just that I was very insecure, like I was talking about before, and I was having a hard time. And music, when you're a sideman and you're competing for jobs, the competition can be brutal.
Yeah.
And I remember, when my addiction was getting really bad, I was always feeling, that I had to have the next really good gig or the next really good gig. A new drummer would come along and he'd be getting attention, and I would be jealous of it, and stuff like that, and wanting to stay on top, and finally it got to the point where, at the end of my addiction, I couldn't handle music anymore that way. I couldn't handle the competitiveness of it, and I actually was quitting it for a while. And I think I got a day job at a stereo store that lasted about 2 weeks. And I said, okay, to hell with this. It was so hard, and I made such little money working in a warehouse that I said I would rather play drums in the worst ass bar
Right.
for $40 a night and do that. And so I kind of had to, stumble along that way for several years as I was getting out of my addiction, and then I started looking at other things I could do, and I started looking at the mental health stuff, and I started going back to college and all that stuff, and then something really strange happened. When I actually was getting my degrees and then getting my license, and when I actually started working in the mental health field, I was doing like Broadway musicals. I'd hooked up with a couple people and places where they did musicals, and I was playing in playing Oklahoma and Annie Get Your Gun and stuff like that. And it was sit-down jobs. I just come to the theater and sit down at the drum sets and play the shows. I worked on Legends and concert shows, which were the very first of the tribute artists, where we'd have all these, now they call them tribute artists, but we would call them, an Elvis and a Neil Diamond, and these people imitators, we would call them.
Wow, this is great.
But I was doing that kind of stuff, and I was really unhappy with music. And then when I started working in the mental health field, and I got like regular full-time 40-hour-a-week jobs, all of a sudden, music in any form, be it in the bars, in the studio, original stuff, became really, really fun again. It became a joy to do every time I do. It was really playing, in that sense of the word, and not like I'm playing music. I mean, I'm playing and having fun making music, and it's kind of continued that way ever since. But I've been putting more and more emphasis on original stuff, trying to get more and more into original things, including my own thing.
How would you?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. How would you define your lineage? Who were your influences? Who Who did you?
Lineage.
Yeah, lineage. Like where did your style come from? And then obviously the Mauceri put his own touch on it.
Oh yeah, I'm a child of the '60s and '70s, and I idolized those drummers back then. I know that you interviewed Hal Blaine, and I got to meet and play with Hal Blaine. I did a gig once. It was an original showcase gig, and Hal Blaine was there playing percussion, and I was playing drums, and I couldn't believe
That's
it.
awesome.
Why am I playing drums, and you're playing shakers and congas next to me? And he goes, "Oh, no, man, it's cool. Just you sound great. Just keep going." And I've met him a couple times, and he's just the sweetest guy, and I love Hal Blaine and his work. And then in the '70s, I worshipped at the altar of Russ Kunkel and Jim Keltner and Jim Gordon. Those were the three guys of the '70s who I just thought were just great, and they were three really different styles of drummers. And if I could, any style I have is roughly based on those four drummers: Jim Gordon, Jim Keltner, Russ Kunkel, and Hal Blaine.
That is, it's so.
And that's grown since then. Like I said before.
No. The majority of the stuff I listen to is Russ Kunkel and Jim Keltner.
Jim Keltner, yeah.
Yeah,
well, it's hard to ignore Jim Gordon. I mean, you can't turn on a radio.
Yeah, I know. Well, no, and John Guerin was another great drummer.
Yeah, John Guerin was a great drummer too. I like him too. But I don't know what he played on a lot except for the Joni Mitchell stuff. He was kind of a jazz guy.
Exactly. He was playing with Roger Kellaway and those cats. But that's beautiful stuff. Could you tell me a good Brent story?
About Brent Mydland? Yeah, I can tell you some Brent stories. I can tell you some. Here's a funny one.
Yeah.
When we were on the road with Batdorf and Rodney, when Brent was in the band, I don't remember how it was. We were doing some tours, and we used to do these tours in a van, and I think we all traveled together a lot of the time. But sometimes John and Mark, Batdorf and Rodney, would fly ahead, and me and Rick and Brent and maybe the road manager would drive in the van, and we would stop at these motels. We weren't making a lot of money. Nobody was, and so we would generally double up in rooms. So John and Mark would share a room, Batdorf and Rodney. We didn't have enough money to get our own rooms, and then the three of us would share a room. And me and Brent and Rick, and often we were staying in cheaper motels and stuff like that, and there would be two full beds, and then they would bring a rollaway bed in. That's how they used to do it back then. They still do have rollaway beds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we would take turns. We would rotate the rollaway bed, and Brent hated the rollaway bed, and so he would flip coins for it. And sometimes Rick would do it too. I would flip too to be part of the thing, but I was okay sleeping in the rollaway bed when it was my turn. But Brent hated it, and every time it was his turn, he would flip with somebody, whoever would do it with him to see who to get out of it. And sometimes he won, and he got out of the rollaway bed. But other times, most of the time, he didn't. He lost, and then he'd have to do the rollaway bed. I think he did it like twice. You have to do it like twice in a row or something like that. And one night we were in Las Vegas, and we were passing through. I don't know if we were playing there or if we were just stopping there. And we stopped at a motel, and there was a rollaway bed situation, and it was nighttime. And Brent didn't want to do it, so he flipped Rick for it, and Rick won. And so Brent got pissed off, and he grabbed a bunch of stuff, and he went out into the parking lot, and he slept in the van. And I don't know, maybe he took the mattress from the rollaway. And it was summertime in Las Vegas. So when he went in at night, it was still cool, but in the morning when he woke up, it was like, inside the van, it was like 120 degrees. And he comes in, and he's all messed up. He'd probably been drinking the night before and stuff like that, too. And so it was very comical, and you know, it would be much more funny if you were actually there.
No, you know, I mean, but you also say that even if he was really close with you, you still really could never. He was a pretty awkward person, or did once socially, or once he would open up.
Yeah,
I mean, even with like you, could you ever really like? Was there always a wall, even with his people he trusted?
Well, like I said before, Brent was kind of always, everything was in his music.
Yeah.
He wrote, when he wanted to be intimate, he put it in a song. I mean, sometimes it was a little awkward, like the song he wrote about being a musician, which wasn't one of my favorite songs, but still the way he sang it and the way the music to it, you could tell that this was really, really important to him. That he write this song about how he viewed it to be a very difficult life to be a musician, and he just, you know, my experience of him was, think about it a little bit. I haven't thought about it for a while, but he, like I said before, you could get along with him. You could sit down and laugh and joke and party with him and stuff. But if you had to try and wrangle with him, disagree with him or something like that, it would be real hard. He didn't know how to compromise real well, or to kind of give and take. He was kind of, it wasn't always, I mean, there was sometimes he would do it, but he kind of had a short fuse.
Right.
And he got frustrated easy. I remember once on the road, he sent his blue jeans out to be washed, and they would come back like starched, pressed, you know, and he hated that. And he would actually kind of go into a big fit about it, and throw them on the ground and stamp on them and stuff like that, partially to get them to loosen up a little bit. But he was kind of an intense guy that way.
Wow.
But, you know, I mean, we would go out to dinner, and you know, he could be pretty good that way. But I never had long, intimate conversations with him like I did with other people. Near the end, I was trying real hard to, because he was so out of control, and I had gotten sober a few years ago, and I was trying to reach out to him, and you know, and I unfortunately I couldn't, but you know.
Were you prevented from intervening?
No, I could go see him whenever I wanted, and I did. I was mainly when I was touring. I would be touring with somebody else, and I'd be up in that area, and I would go see him. And I would talk to him about getting sober and stuff like that.
Yeah, but he was.
He wasn't ready then. He was way out of control.
Well, you got to go watch your TV show, so we'll wrap this up. I'll put this thing together, and then I'll.
I'm really looking forward to hearing it, and anytime you want to talk, you know, I'd be glad to do it. If you want to do part 2.5. Yeah, no,
we
apologize for cutting you off.
No, it's all good, man. It's do you, just out of curiosity, do you have any idea how I can get a hold of John McIntyre?
No, I don't. I haven't talked to him.
He's not an actor anymore?
Not right after Brent died. Have you tried calling the Grateful Dead offices?
No, I never tried. Is that place still even open?
I'm assuming that there's still something up there in San Rafael.
All right, yeah. Okay.
I'll try and I have some old numbers. I can try. I don't have one on John, but I can see if there's a way of getting in touch with him. I have no idea where he is, though. Yeah.
Well, don't worry about it. I just was, he's a cat I've actually wanted to talk to for a while, so I'll have to figure it out.
Okay.
We'll do 2.2b, but I'll put this one together and email it to you, and then let me know that you got it. I'll try to get this to you in the next couple days.
Okay, man.
Yeah.
It's been an honor to talk to you. I really appreciate it. I can't tell you what it means to me to have somebody like you call me up and ask me questions about my life. it's really a treat. I've been on cloud nine ever since you and I started talking, and I told my wife, I said, he knows everything about me. He knows the people I worked with when I was in high school. It's been really exciting.
No, man, it's that's part of the reason I did the show.
Very cool.
So yeah, take it easy, man. Have a good night.
All right, I want to stay in touch with you. Okay.
We will, brother.
Okay, you take care.
Take care. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Bye.